Now, joining us live from Warri, Delta State, to talk about comments on some elder statesmen about some issues grappling Nigeria is Chief Robinson Ariyo, a public affairs analyst and legal practitioner. Good evening and thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Good evening. It's always my pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
All right, so right to the questions. How will you describe several calls for reassessment of economic policies by notable Nigerians like Obasanjo, Anyoko, and others?
In a simple word, legitimate. Legitimate because there were expectations from this particular administration that is in place now. And it is noteworthy that the administration has already spent more than a year. And when one triangulates what we have on the table with what we expected to have on the table, then you agree with me that these calls are quite legitimate. In other words, we must understand that democracy is a people-oriented and people-driven kind of government. So let us take for granted, let us leave the argument that perhaps we did not elect Mr. President. That argument has been laid to rest by law. So we elected him to do what? To do our bidding. And that is the bidding of attending to our legitimate yearnings, addressing insecurity, addressing hunger, addressing infrastructure. And we find that these three cardinal things, which are of greatest concerns to Nigerians, are not being affected by the policies of the government. For instance, you would record that the very first steps that this particular administration took was to remove subsidy. Whether subsidy has actually been removed or not, we are feeling the impact. And what we have as a caricature policy is the plan to dole out physical cash to the citizenry. There is nowhere in the world where doling out physical cash to citizenry can be a sustainable economic policy. Doling out cash can hold interim, temporary. You find that even the doling out of the cash has not even happened. Not to talk about the cardinal policies that should be put in place. What are we doing? What are we doing about the insecurity in the land? As a matter of fact, things have deteriorated to the extent that certain areas of Nigeria where we didn't have to experience the kind of insecurity we experience today, we have started experiencing insecurity. Is it in Delta State? Then look at the roads. The roads are terrible. So, that it will not be right for an elder statesman to say that we are sitting on a keg of gunpowder.
Okay, all right. So we also know that since the 1st of August, there have been protests in Nigeria that are supposed to last to the 10th day. And we have former President Olusegun Obasanjo also describing the demands of Nigerian youth in the ongoing hunger protest as legitimate. Do you also agree with that?
Absolutely. In fact, if there are stronger terms to describe the protest, it should be that it is overdue, far overdue. Of course, some people may say that when President Obasanjo was there, what did he do and what did he not do? That is not the issue now. The issue now is yesterday has gone, we are in today. Is it the price of fuel? The price of in the market? Is it the ratio, the exchange rate between naira and dollar? Whatever index you will elect to use to measure the performance of this administration, it is abysmal failure. Now, it is not enough to say that the administration has just been in existence for about a year. What was promised us was that the government would hit the ground running. And one of the signals that the government gave to us that it would hit the ground running was the removal of subsidy. Now, if subsidy has been removed, one of the logical questions you should ask is that what is the removal, the funds that would have been used for sustaining subsidy what are these funds being used for?
Okay,
Our
very
rules
well.
today
We also have some
complete debt trap.
Nigerians who have been calling for inclusion of referendum in our constitution. How would you relate this to our present challenges?
Well, you see, the problem is not laws, it is not policy, it's not framework. Laws, policies, and frameworks are in the papers. The problem we have is attitudinal. For instance, do we really need to have referendum injected or inserted into our constitution before, for instance, non-performing legislators will be recalled? Those provisions are there. In other words, the checks that we have, referendum is part of one of the checks that you could have by the citizenry against policies and programs of government that are not going on properly. Now, that we don't have frameworks in place to check some of the existing abnormalities that we have? The answer is no. We do have sufficient frameworks in place to check these, but we are not using them. It is not enough to pad your constitution with 1,000 or 1 million things. It is how implementable the spirit. It is the spirit behind whatever provision. It is the spirit behind whatever paper policy that you have. That is our problem. Nigeria has one of the thickest constitutions in the world. There are countries, if you compare the volume of Nigerian constitution with that of many other countries, you will discover that we have, if it is by volume, then Nigeria should be performing. The problem we have, I want to repeat, are not the law, they are not the theoretical policy, they are the implementation, the spirit behind them, those to implement them. And that is why we say the problem in this country is not about making more laws. It's not about legislating. We want to legislate everything into existence without having a corresponding attitude. What we have already is enough to take us to the promised land if truly we address ourselves to them and we are committed to the implementation of all of them. You can't
All right,
remember
we thank you
anywhere in
so much,
Nigeria
sir,
where a
for sharing your
legislative
views with us on the news at this time. Many thanks for joining us on the news.
always welcome.
All right, and that's Chief Robinson Ariyo, public affairs analyst and legal practitioner, who joined us live from Warri.